Imagine being in a legendary army, serving under the command of one of the greatest generals in history, Julius Caesar. After years of battles, spilled blood, and promises of rewards, you and your comrades return home expecting honor and glory. But instead you find silence. The leader who promised riches and lands is far away, embroiled in conflicts in Egypt. Loyalty begins to wear thin. Has Caesar forgotten you? Is he even still alive? Tension grows, the camps ignite, and revolt seems inevitable. But then Caesar returns, and with a simple psychological trick, he completely turns the tables, causing the soldiers, who were on the brink of betraying him, to beg for his forgiveness. How did he manage to transform a mutiny into unwavering loyalty? In today's video, we're going to unveil this brilliant strategy that cemented Caesar as a master of manipulation and military command. But before we dive into this incredible story, have you already subscribed to the channel? Hit the bell so you don't miss epic content like this about the Roman Empire. And again, before we dive into this amazing story, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss any of our videos filled with historical curiosities about ancient Rome. The echo of unfulfilled promises. Have you ever imagined how disappointment could turn the most loyal veterans into potential conspirators? It's time to understand how the thread of trust began to unravel. To set the stage, let's go back to when Caesar fought tirelessly in the Gallic Wars. The 10th Legion, like other legions, placed unwavering faith in the general who had promised them fertile lands and generous rewards. At the peak of his campaigns, Caesar nurtured these dreams to ensure his men fought with fervor, and indeed, they were tireless. However, when the civil war erupted and the general had to confront Pompey, many matters were left unresolved, including those much-desired rewards. Months turned into years, and victories continued to pile up, yet the triumphant return and the promised lands were never delivered. Publius Sulpicius, a man of strong temperament and immense sense of justice, began openly questioning Caesar's officers. Along with other centurions, he suspected that the promised lands might never materialize. And amidst this skepticism, the desire for stability for their families transformed into growing frustration. We can't solely blame human ambition. Back then, military life was exhausting, full of risks and deprivations. With the promise of receiving a dignified life at the end of so many sacrifices, it was natural that delays in payment would spark suspicion. Caesar, though respected, was increasingly seen as absent. Some believed he was more concerned with consolidating political power in Rome, or even involved in lavish festivities alongside Cleopatra. The truth is, that delay opened the door to rumors that spread like wildfire. Have you ever wondered how this delay shaped the destiny of an empire? Hit the like button now, so we can keep bringing you stories as impactful as this. The return of Caesar and the rumors of Egypt. If the soldiers were already convinced that their patience had run out, imagine their reaction upon discovering Caesar's supposed involvement in exotic parties in Egypt. Let's see how these rumors spread. While the 10th Legion suffered in Italy, Caesar was venturing into Egypt, entangled in political intrigues and a controversial relationship with Cleopatra. The young queen, with her vibrant and strategic personality, saw in Caesar more than just a mere military ally. Together, they became embroiled in a battle of interests and hearts, while the rest of the army grew increasingly impatient. Sallustius was sent to mediate some disagreements, but he found no receptivity. The soldiers felt ignored for far too long. Rumor had it that Caesar attended parties that lasted until the early hours, sailed the Nile alongside Cleopatra, and had nearly forgotten his commitments to Rome. This image of a relaxed leader, detached from his obligations, only fueled the veterans' fury. Dissatisfaction grew to such an extent that attempts at control by officers like Mark Antony proved ineffective. The 10th Legion no longer wanted empty explanations. They wanted action. Deep down, the soldiers respected Caesar, yet they felt that their unwavering devotion had been betrayed. His power was beginning to waver at its very foundation, as legions free to think and conspire posed a real threat. Back in Rome, the political elites watched the situation closely. On one hand, this growing internal animosity could weaken Caesar and empower his opponents. On the other, there was fear that an unruly legion might even invade the city itself. The scenario was one of pure tension. The spark of the revolt. After so much waiting and tense rumors, what happens when the limit of patience is reached? It is the moment of chaos that everyone feared. As time dragged on and nothing seemed to change, the rebellion took shape. Publius, Sulpicius and other centurions, furious over the lack of answers, organized small secret meetings in improvised tents. They began to envisage taking their grievances to Rome by force of arms. Their strategy: to mutiny before being forced to accept any offer less than what had been promised. Amid the frustration, their speeches ignited troops who no longer trusted in rumors of Caesar's supposed triumphant return. In no time, the heightened emotions resulted in acts of violence. Officers sent to quell the revolt were manhandled, sometimes even physically assaulted and stoned. Not even Mark Antony, one of Caesar's most trusted men, was spared. When he tried to mediate the situation, he was ridiculed and forced to retreat to avoid being lynched by the furious rebels. The 10th Legion made it clear that it no longer recognized anyone's authority besides its own. News spread quickly, reaching Caesar's ears as he was returning from Egypt after dealing with the siege of Alexandria. Worried, he sent Sallustius to negotiate, but his emissary nearly paid with his life. The mob of rebellious soldiers threatened him, accusing him of being just another messenger of empty promises. It was clear that only Caesar's physical presence could stem the imminent chaos. The general, who had already demonstrated his courage in battle, would now have to showcase all his political and psychological prowess. Had you heard this intriguing detail before? Leave a comment and share your thoughts. The surprising arrival of Caesar. The soldiers were on the verge of marching against Rome, but Caesar made an unexpected decision. How would men, ready to revolt, react upon seeing their leader appear with almost no protection? Instead of assembling a grand escort or recruiting loyal troops from other legions to suppress the revolt, Caesar decided to face the 10th Legion alone. He mounted his horse and, against the advice of Mark Antony and other allies, rode straight toward the mutinous camp. It was a bold and dangerous gesture, but it also demonstrated his absolute confidence in his own presence and persuasion. This was a man who had conquered Gaul and confronted Pompey, and he believed he could also triumph in the arena of psychology. When he arrived, Caesar made no fuss. He went directly to the center of the camp, climbed onto a small improvised platform, and without uttering a single word, waited. A profound silence fell over everyone. The still furious soldiers were struck silent, astonished by the courage of the leader they were about to betray. It was a symbolic moment, a silent duel of gazes between the general and his legions. On one side, resentful soldiers. On the other, a commander who refused to back down. The scene was tense. Many expected Caesar to try to placate them, to offer last-minute rewards, or even to promise more than he had ever been able to deliver. But then he revealed his trump card. He did not beg for forgiveness, nor did he plead. Instead, he placed himself in a position where the soldiers had no choice but to listen. That steadfast stance spoke volumes, far more than 1,000 arguments ever could. The next step would prove decisive in the course of the revolt. The speech that changed everything. Can you imagine how just a few words could undo the hatred and revolt that had been building for so many months? Prepare yourself for the speech that made history. At last, Caesar began to speak. What he said wasn't a list of promises or excuses. It was something much simpler, and at the same time devastating. He granted the dismissal of the soldiers and announced that they could leave as citizens, no longer as his comrades. This change in terminology was a masterstroke. Until then, the word comrade symbolized brotherhood, mutual commitment, and shared honor in battle. Removing that word meant stripping away the bond that existed between them and their general. The announcement was met with a mix of relief and shock. Relief for some, who truly wished to return to their families and end their military life. Shock for the majority, for it signified the end of the dream of glory alongside one of the greatest commanders Rome had ever seen. Moreover, although the dismissal was what they had demanded, it came with a deep pain. Caesar made it clear that without him, they would be nothing more than ordinary men, devoid of the prestige that came from belonging to the legendary 10th Legion. Silence enveloped the camp. Many soldiers were left speechless. Some tried to retort, but found themselves at a loss in the face of Caesar's resolute stance. He neither insulted them, nor threatened them, nor even raised his voice. He simply stripped them of their greatest treasure, the feeling of being special. And it was precisely with this psychological blow that the rebellion began to crumble. The legion realized that by defying Caesar, they were on the verge of losing the very identity they so cherished. Would you help us continue sharing epic stories like this one? Leave a like and share this video with everyone who loves topics about ancient Rome. The desperate reaction of the soldiers. How do men hardened by war react when their greatest pride is put into question? Up next, we witness the dramatic transformation that swept over the 10th Legion. The damage was done. While the soldiers once believed that breaking away from Caesar was the best solution, they now realized that such a split would be far more painful than they had ever anticipated. The title Comrades was an emotional bond connecting them to the prestige of the greatest general of their time. Without it, they would be nothing more than a band of veterans without a leader, without a clear direction. This realization was like a bucket of cold water on the flames of rebellion. In successive waves, men who had once shouted for independence were now begging Caesar to reconsider. Some offered personal sacrifices, others pleaded for punishment, just so they could remain in his ranks. The scene was moving. The once rebellious legion transformed into a sea of contrite faces, ready to admit their mistakes. It wasn't just the fear of losing benefits or rewards. It was the stark notion that without Caesar, they would have no grand cause at all. Yet, Caesar remained steadfast. He even showed a hint of sadness in his voice as he replied that trust, once broken, was hard to rebuild. This only deepened the soldiers' despair. The general, already renowned as a brilliant military strategist, now proved equally ingenious in the art of guiding minds and hearts. Those who were ready to march on Rome in defiance of him began to plead for just a simple sign of forgiveness. The final negotiation and the secret punishment. After so much drama, what more was needed to seal the fate of these men? We have reached the moment when Caesar tests them once again. At last, after letting the weight of despair bear down on the soldiers, Caesar did what seemed impossible. He decided to accept their return to the army. However, there was one glaring exception. The 10th Legion, which had been the epicenter of the revolt, would not be welcomed. This announcement sparked a new wave of fervent pleas, as no one wanted to be excluded from future campaigns, much less lose the privilege of fighting alongside Rome's greatest commander. In an apparent display of magnanimity, he yielded to the pressure and even readmitted the 10th Legion. But deep down, Caesar had taken note of the names of the principal instigators of the rebellion. These individuals would be assigned the most dangerous missions in upcoming campaigns. Many historians believe that this was Caesar's way not only of discreetly punishing those who had undermined his authority, but also of purging his ranks of any potential negative influences for the future. It was a silent yet effective measure. For the common soldiers, Caesar's pardon brought relief and renewed hope. Discipline was reborn, fueled by the excitement of continuing to serve a legendary leader. For the marked conspirators, however, fate would be cruel. They would either die in battle or be forced to prove their courage and loyalty in extreme ways to atone for their past deeds. This reintegration under strict conditions reinforced Caesar's psychological power while maintaining the cohesion of his troops. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now is the time. Join our legion of enthusiasts and help spread the history of the Roman Empire. The rebuilding of the army and the campaign in Africa. Now that tensions had subsided, Caesar's army resumed its march to battle. But had trust really been restored? With the revolt officially subdued and the troops back under control, Julius Caesar wasted no time. He ordered everyone to prepare for a campaign toward Africa, where Pompey's supporters still posed a threat. The 10th Legion, once the leader of a mutiny, had to prove its worth to leave that stain in the past. Interestingly, this forced rapprochement resulted in even greater cohesion. The men felt they had to perform at all costs. The arrival in Africa was marked by strategic battles against forces that supported Pompey, even though he was already dead. There were Pompeian generals and senators determined to maintain the resistance, aware that many of his legions still harbored grievances or fears. Caesar used his influence to remind the soldiers of their joint conquests. The scorching sands of the African continent became the stage for fierce combat, and the 10th Legion in particular fought with the ferocity of those seeking to reclaim their place of honor. Just as in Roman myths, Caesar even brought along a member of the Scipio family, believing in the legend that no Scipio could ever be defeated on African soil. These symbolic details boosted the morale of the troops. If once the army had been shattered by internal discord, it now marched with renewed determination, driven by the desire to erase the error of the revolt and prove to the world that they were still the most formidable military force on the planet. The triumphant conclusion and Caesar's legacy. You are about to see how this episode of Revolt and Reconciliation shaped the rest of Caesar's history and his legend. Ready for the finale? With the victories in Africa, Caesar consolidated his power, silencing any doubt about his leadership. The 10th Legion, once rebellious, regained its prestige and came to be hailed as a symbol of restored discipline. The lesson for both sides was clear. Caesar demonstrated that victory is achieved not only through military might, but above all, through psychological strategy. The soldiers learned that their honor was deeply tied to the commander they so admired. Wasn't long before Caesar returned to Rome, with even greater political influence and a reputation for invincibility. His ability to manipulate minds and hearts was as lethal as his skill with the sword and tactics. Yet, not even all that power could shield him from the political conspiracies that would later emerge and ultimately end his life on the Ides of March. Still, the way he tamed the most dangerous military revolt became yet another legendary chapter in his biography. Thus, we conclude our journey through the story of how Julius Caesar rescued the loyalty of a troop on the brink of mutiny, employing a psychological trick that few leaders would dare attempt. This episode reinforces that a commander's true strength isn't limited to the battlefield. It extends to his ability to inspire and, if necessary, confront the emotions of his followers. If you enjoyed this trip back in time and want more fascinating stories, subscribe to the channel, leave a like and share this video with your friends. We'd love to hear what you think about this emblematic episode. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next video about ancient Rome and its vast empire.